So my first question is, if you could snap your fingers and just make these people do something and just have that happen, what would you have them do that you think would have the most impact on their success?
Ooh, I like that question. I think a big mistake that early stage founders make is not trying enough things and almost maybe thinking too hard and thinking too much, doing too little, right? So I think that you're going to have a big list of to-dos or ideas coming out of this, and I think the two things is I'd say try to ship something, a sales page, a cold email, a LinkedIn outreach, something that actually starts touching customers, in the first 6 days, 5 days after you leave MicroConf. The other thing is try to start a streak. Like, you pick up the calendar. I think it was it Jerry Seinfeld who did the calendar, and he would write an X on a day that he wrote jokes. Doesn't matter if the jokes were good or bad, wrote an X. Pretty soon, he had 20, 30, 40 days of writing it, and he's like, I don't want to break that. So break out your calendar, write an X. I mean, it's similar, Mike and I have been podcasting for like 300 years, and the only reason that we've continued to do that is because we have a streak now that we don't want to break.
I like that a lot. I was talking to Ted Pitts last night, and he says, I just like to make sure that every day I'm working on the most important thing, and I make a little progress every day. And if those two things are true, you're golden.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So what mistakes do you think people make consistently in the early days, besides, let's say, not shipping or not being consistent?
I think these days there's a lot of advice coming at you and a lot of ideas, and I think that going off the beaten path and potentially trying something that you think is almost a flyer or that no one else is talking about can be scary, but I think not enough people try it. I mean, as an example, like, how many people in this room maybe in the next month will go out and like try to buy an app instead of building it? Because the conventional wisdom, or everyone's talking about building, but like going off that beaten path can often get you there faster. I think being willing to not just take the prescribed route. And again, I run MicroConf, right? So it's like we do have a lot of advice and prescription, and I do think that that's good. But I also think that as founders, we have to make decisions with incomplete information, and being able to take, at least a risk here and there, I think is a good thing.
Was your first thing a thing you bought? Was it the towels?
No, it wasn't the beach towels. That was like the third or fourth. I launched a bunch of things that failed that I built. And then eventually I got to the point where I was consulting, I was making a good chunk of money, and I realized I had just a bit more money than time. And so that's where I bought .NET Invoice for like all the money I had in my bank account. It was like $11,000. It was a huge amount of money. And it was still in alpha, it was really buggy, and it was a bad purchase until I had my back to the wall because I'd written an $11,000 check, kind of turned it around.
You went over it really fast, but I think it's important to call out for people is that you launched a bunch of things that failed. That was your start.
That's right, yeah. And it was 5 years of that, nights and weekends, on and off. But this was 2000 to 2005. There was Joel Spolsky was literally the only person blogging about this. This was before I had started talking about it. It was pre-Patrick McKenzie. It was pre-everybody. So I was just fishing around in the dark, in essence.
So if you want to do what Rob Walling did and you spend the first 5 years not being successful, that doesn't mean you're not on the path. Like, you can probably do better now. There's more information now. There's a better support network.
Yeah.
So maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 2 years, but starting with failure does not predict your future.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I would hope it would be shorter for everyone in this room, though, just because we've all learned from the mistakes that we've all made, and so hopefully you're standing on the shoulders of others to do that.
You can make brand new mistakes. Awesome. Which of your comic books do you value the most?
Oh, geez. So, little known fact. So one of my first businesses was selling comic books like in junior high and grammar school. I would mark them up, 25% or something. And I always and then I started a little comic book store, and then it was not cool to do that. It was late 80s, early 90s. I could never afford the comics I actually wanted, which were the classic Silver Age stuff. First appearance of Spider-Man, it's Amazing Fantasy 15, right? Amazing Spider-Man #1, Fantastic Four #1, X-Men #1, like all the superheroes that are huge on the screen today, their first appearances were low thousands of dollars back then. Well, now they're tens of thousands of dollars. And after I sold Drip, it was the first time in my life I had enough money that I could take little flyers with small, 2% of my net worth in Bitcoin or whatever, right? And so it was 2016, and I bought some comics. So I think my favorite one is it's slabbed, so it's encased in this plastic and it's graded and it's verified that it's authentic and everything. But it's first appearance of Spider-Man. Yeah,
Yes.
Amazing Fantasy 15.
Is that in the safety deposit box?
It is. It's worth now. So it was a few. I wish I'd have bought it in the '80s because it's like tens of thousands of dollars now. So yeah, it's cool. I'd totally go there and like seriously just look at it and like
Can you smell it, or is it in the box?
No, it's in the box.
Okay.
I have bought some other old comics for much less that are not in the in the case just to because that old paper smells cool.
I remember after you sold Drip, I was talking to you and Sherry and saying I talked to you about it and you were like, what do you think will be next? You're like, I'm definitely not doing a startup again. And I talked to Sherry and I was like, that's garbage, right? And she's like, well, I think he'll start something. Like, you can't just hang out. Did you know after Drip, had a sense of what would be next for you? Did you have an idea of your next step?
I didn't. I wanted to take time off. I was a little burned out. And it's just, it's a long road to go through. It was like 5.5 years from when Derek and I started until I left Drip. So 3-ish years, was that right? Yeah, 3.5 years till the sale. Something like that. And 5.5 years for me is a long time. Like, I've been working, my professional career has been 19 years. So that's like almost a third of my career. And I don't tend to, the longest job I had prior to that was like 2 years, right? I think a lot of us in here just get bored with stuff. So I had no idea what was next, but I did take 6 weeks off and then started thinking about TinySeed, or just started thinking about what was next and looking at trends. And it just became kind of obvious there was another gap in the market. So TinySeed is kind of a startup, but it's starting to feel more like that now that we're dealing with this, we're finding product market fit and, customer development and even like all the legal stuff that goes along with it. It feels similar.
What you said when you said you didn't want to do a startup again, it sounded like because you didn't want the stress again.
Yeah.
You didn't want the intensity to be quite that high. Do you feel like you've achieved that? Like, does TinySeed feel as stressful as Drip did in the early days?
Nope,
okay.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's different. Like,
Because
starting a SaaS it's just, for me, at least in my head, it's a lot different. And I feel like, I don't know. I feel like if I was starting, no matter what I start, like, look at David Cancel. He's on his 5th startup. He's exited 4 of them successfully. Not acqui-hires, but like sold them for quite a bit of money. And it took him 2 years until Drift. And he raised, I think, $15 million like on day one because he's David Cancel. And everybody wrote him a check. And it took him 2 years to get to where Drift was even like starting to get traction. It doesn't get easier, Or I should say, maybe it gets easier with more resources, but you don't compress that time. And I think that's what I got tired of, was like, you do one and then you do one, and every time you're starting over and it's still a long journey. And with TinySeed, it's not like that, right? It's like much more quick to get there.
So if people are thinking about starting SaaSes, maybe they should instead raise a fund and invest in companies?
Don't do that. No, I think if they're thinking about starting SaaS, they should, you and I were just looking at compounding MRR. Like, it is the golden ticket, man. It's what I would, if I were not where I am today, I would go start a SaaS. But I've done it now, and I've kind of, I want that next challenge, in all honesty. It's not just because I burned out. It's because I'm all healed from that now. But it's because I've done it a bunch of times, right? You don't want to do the same thing 3, 4, 5 times. It does start to get repetitive, and learning new things, I think, is what a lot of us are here for.
What did it take to get healed from that burnout?
Time off, yeah. And just distance from things. I bet most people in this room have burned out on something or other, right? On your work, on whatever. And it often takes a lot of self-reflection. It might take going on a retreat, taking 3 days and burning. It depends on how far into that you are, But distance, time off, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Probably helps to have a spouse who's like a therapist for founders in particular.
It does indeed.
Yeah. /coach, yeah. Where would you say, are you familiar with the term zone of genius?
Yeah.
Where would you say yours is?
Oh, boy, that's hard. That's hard because, like, when I was working on Drip, it was like, with Derek, it was like our ability to build a product that people wanted and go where, to make the right call, to go, not just listen to every customer, but go where we felt like the market was going, and to kind of look ahead 12 months and be like, marketing automation is going to be a thing, and to bet on that. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Because I think of like MicroConf. Like, we started it when SaaS wasn't a thing. It's 2011. We started it when there really weren't many startup conferences. It was BOS and a bunch of venture-funded stuff. And yet here we are. You know what? Zone of Genius might just be showing up for a long time, honestly. just, I mean, again, the podcast, 438 episodes, the conference, the 18th one, most conferences don't last more than 3 or 4. Drip was a slog for 2 years. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like that value of hard work that you learn as a kid, playing sports or working on things. I don't know. I don't know if that's a zone of genius as much as just an ethic. It's like I'm going to pound my head against this thing until it works.
I like that a lot. I have built up a bit of an audience over the years, and people are like, how do you start building an audience? I'm like, just get going and do it for a long time.
Yeah.
And if you want to get where Rob is, it's kind of like show up again and again and do these things repeatedly.
Right. And some of them don't work, as we've talked about. I mean, even things that I did in the late, 2008, 2009 flopped pretty big. I wrote some ebooks and tried to sell them, and those didn't. You still have these failures, but you don't need to be right every time. I mean, you can be right, half the time and do quite well.
Yeah. And it sounds like for your first answer to that zone of genius question was kind of like spotting the next trend. And I wonder how much of that is the fact that you showed up so much and you were so plugged in because you did the conference so much and you did the podcast and you saw what was resonating.
Yeah, that's right. It's exposure, right? It's like, how do you get exposed to intelligent people doing interesting things and have a lot of conversations? Well, you do it by running a conference or having a podcast where you answer 127 questions in a year. You're just we're just constantly thinking about what's going on in the space, and eventually you do start to see patterns. Hopefully they're not just in your head. They're actually real.
What are your investment criteria for TinySeed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I don't. So we do have a doc that it looks at like MRR and churn and all these things. How do they look? And then founders, do they have this, that? What's their zone of genius? I mean, we kind of have that in the doc.
What are those things?
I mean, it looks really at it's like founder, and then it's traction, and then is the market big enough to at least get into the 7 or 8 figures, right? Because there's some markets that are just too small. And then, what was the last one? Oh, the product itself, right? Those are kind of the 5. It's like, I think it's maybe Techstars who says it's like founder, market, product. That's the thing. And it's like real estate, right? The 3 rules of real estate: location. They're basically saying founder is 2 or 3 times more important than the other things.
What attributes of the founder?
I think there are a lot of different ways to be successful as a founder. This is the thing I've learned, running this community and working in the community, and also I've done angel investments, right, for the past couple years, 8 years, I guess now. And I've learned that there are certain founders who get through because they're successful because they're pushing it, and they're going to kill it, and they're aggressive and da-da-da-da. But not aggressive in a bad way, but aggressive in, I'm going to be successful. And then there are other very soft-spoken, chill founders who just show up every day and get it done. There's people with like a SaaS skill set that's super cool. There's people with marketing skill set. There's people with design, development. Like each of these, something has to relate. Or there's even subject matter experts. We're talking to a founder who has a PhD in food science, and the SaaS is in like the food, the food-ish kitchen space or whatever. So I guess that was, there's some type of expertise, and I think that the whole idea of Silicon Valley pattern matching, where they're like, it's Mark Zuckerberg, like it's a 24-year-old college dropout or whatever. Like I don't believe that. I think a big part of it is because of the founders in this community who I've seen who don't look like him, in so many ways, not just physically, but I didn't get here that way, and I think a lot of people here come through other avenues, and so I think almost having an open mind to different experience levels, I think, is important.
How do you fight the probably very natural cognitive bias to choose people that kind of remind you of you?
I don't think I'm the best founder. Like, I don't. I think that I should have gotten where I got much faster, and if I was a better founder. Yeah, I do. And that's how I fight it, because it's easy. I actually want people who are different than me, who have more design chops or more development chops or more, whatever it is. There's just ways to be better than I am, for sure.
When you say that you feel like you should have gotten there faster, what do you think kept you from getting there faster?
Fear. Yeah, I was too scared. I mean, this is Rob circa 2005. Too scared to send cold emails. I was too scared to get in face-to-face conversations at conferences. I was too scared to get up on a stage and speak. The first 10 podcast episodes we recorded, they are awful, and we were terrified, and we almost scripted out the entire thing, almost verbatim. And the terror of firsts, I wrote a blog post called that. And it's like the first time you do anything, you're really scared of it, and then the 10th time you do it, you're just not. So like being up here on stage right now, zero fear. But the first time we ran MicroConf, like we were super jittery and all like, that's why we started telling the bad jokes. It was almost to like, we just didn't know what else to do. It's like, how do I not just sit up here and kind of like shake like this and have a week, and that's what I wished. I wished I had, I wished I had more confidence. I think that it took me a long time to build.
All right, I'm going to switch segments here. So this is the underrated, overrated segment.
Oh, boy.
I stole this from Tyler Cowen. So I'm just going to throw out a couple things, and you tell me if they are underrated or overrated.
You're not going to mention reality TV stars, are you?
Nope.
All right, good.
All right, chat bots.
Overrated, but in the short term, overrated, in the long term, underrated.
How come?
Because I think they're going to be a thing, but I think there's a bunch of, much like cryptocurrency, where it's like, I think in the long term, cryptocurrency is a thing, just a personal opinion, but in the short term, everyone thinks it's a thing, so it's really overrated.
Las Vegas.
Overrated. Every year we try not to do it here, but hopefully next year it won't be in Vegas.
Okay.
We do it for here. Yeah, I know. We do it here for cost reasons. We would probably have to add $200 to each ticket price in order to like move it to Portland.
Would you pay that?
Yeah. Show of hands, would anyone pay $200 more? It's not very many people, actually. There's only about 30 people. So,
paid ads.
Oh, that's good. I would say underrated. It depends on the circle, but I think that not enough people take advantage of paid ads, because if you can get that engine going, it's nuts. Like pouring in $1, getting $3 out, super cool.
Did you make that work for Drip?
So. I made it work really well for HitTail. I made it work really well for a bunch of smaller apps before that. .NET Invoice was one of them. Drip, we had positive ROI, but it wasn't like a major growth engine. Like integrations and other things and the kind of community and getting that mini brand up were, I'd say, more powerful, word of mouth. But paid ads is good.
Twitter.
Overrated. I have wanted to quit Twitter for like 3 years, but just keep getting pulled back to it.
How come?
Why am I pulled back to it, or have I wanted
Both.
to quit? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I obviously enjoy conversations, with folks in the community, but I feel like there's no nuance there. And if you actually want to have a conversation, you should probably just do it on a podcast. Someone asked a question on Twitter, and I'll start replying, and it's like, this is going to take me 1,000 words or 5 minutes on a podcast to actually answer it well with nuance and not just say one sentence. Like one sentence typically doesn't capture it. So I struggle with that.
Batman.
Underrated. Lego Batman is super cool. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.